And if you go on the web, you'll find a rather nice dynamical network of 45 years of ideas flowing through a group of people. And I found that visualization quite informative in terms of thinking about how knowledge emerges out of a community of people that are connected together. And so I think this leads us to some very practical questions in an educational context. Not only what should be done in universities and should be done elsewhere, but actually how the structure of the network enables certain kinds of knowledge versus other kinds of knowledge. I don't want to be too positivist about this, but I think it's really useful to understanding these topics. On the left is an example from the group of Bruno Latour, who've looked just at web connectivity and website connectivity. And what's quite remarkable is you can see controversies emerge on the web, and the websites separate, polarize, and then if there's resolution, the websites connect again. And so you can almost, as an observer, look at intellectual discourse happening through the online structures. And so I think we can almost ask over the next 10, 20 years, as we go into networked education systems, and I think on the first day you discussed peer-to-peer and so on, how actually by carefully designing the way we connect things together, we can actually enhance certain kind of behaviors and suppress others. The chart from David Goldberg that I like to show is this one, and don't try and read the words. What I like about this chart, that they call it network knowledge, but you could almost interpret this as there's an art cluster, a science cluster, and a technology cluster, or if you were misreading it, it might be universities, government, and corporations, or if you were reading it in yet another sense, it might be Western Europe, Asia, and the Southern Hemisphere. And so indeed, there are different ways of thinking about how knowledge is connected together, whereby looking at the connectivity in different ways, I think you can get different entry points. And what David Goldberg likes to emphasize is that when you start thinking this way, it's really not meaningful to think about interdisciplinarity or transdisciplinarity or pluridisciplinarity. It's really where's your entry point into this knowledge network, and what do you connect together to create new knowledge? And I really like this way of thinking rather than thinking about disciplines. About 20 years ago, Roy said we got to stop using the word art. And we haven't found a better word, have we, Roy? But I think we tend to get trapped in these terminologies, and this network knowledge picture, I think, is quite a useful one. Just want to throw you a few other network images. On the left is actually the connectivity of neurons. There are some very interesting recent techniques which allow you to do three-dimensional imaging of the way neurons are connected together and actually look at new connections being formed. Of course, on the right, in turbulence, energy flows through networks of turbulence in different kinds of ways, very different kind of network. On the left is slime mold. It looks like the east coast of the United States, but it isn't. It's not a transportation system, it's actually slime mold growing. And on the right, of course, an image I always like to show, which is the dark matter network in simulations of the universe on the very largest scales. And so in all these networks, the same kind of mathematical approaches can be used to understand how those networks evolve. So I just want to add in here an idea which I find quite attractive, which is now if you think of networks, the question is how does data enter those networks? And traditionally we think of scholars injecting knowledge into the library, into the archive. But if you have a really distributed network model, there's a term that's floating around recently on the internet called community remote sensing. And so this is the idea of having billions of people entering data into the system. And so you end up then with a community remote sensing system that combines data entry and knowledge entry into the network, citizen science, social networks, crowdsourcing, and all the various emerging ways of collaborative work that have been happening in recent decades. And I think it's sort of interesting of thinking this kind of gets back into some of the global mind ideas that were circulating 30, 40 years ago, of how this network now, data is entering it in so many millions of different places.